afternoon, everyone.
relative, and he said there will be repercussions,
That's what.
and that's why the House got money.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Directors agenda
Buy a
meeting
seatbelt.
for May 9th, where we have the opportunity to review the agenda for our meeting on May 16th, a week from today, at 6 o'clock. So the first item on our agenda today is a presentation, another employee retirement recognition for an old friend of mine, Sergeant George Bethel.
Mayor, members of the board, you're right, this is kind of bittersweet. These officers that have been with us, in this case, George has been with us for 36 years. His awards and honors include Officer of the Month in 1983, the Life Saving Award in 1996, the Medal of Merit in 2000, Police Commendation Bar in 2003 and 2009, and numerous letters of commendations from the U.S. Secret Service and the Department of Justice for dignitary protection. Sergeant Bethel's favorite memory of working for the city includes when he was first promoted by Chief Doc Hale in 1988. Secondly, I was very proud to see the enhancements of security, traffic, and control plans for Riverfest, Razorback football, and Arkansas State Fair put in place. The result of this planning drastically reduced activity and improved the traffic flow in and around Little Rock's major events. Sergeant Bethel's plans for retirement call for him to move to Mountain View, Arkansas, where he plans to relax, hunt, fish, play golf, and work on his farm. This time, let me ask Chief Buckner to come up and say a few things about Sergeant Bethel.
Mayor, board, Mr. Carpenter, Mr. Moore. George Bethel. One of the things that I think is important for everyone to know, not only the board, but also our citizens, the Boston Marathon taught us that we can't take special events for granted. They were on 100+ years that they had put that event on before they had that terror attack. We have several special events that go on in our city, probably 100+. And there are a lot of planning things that go on logistically to make sure that those things go off without a hitch. And it's no accident that you don't have some of those kind of circumstances. And George has kind of been our little human computer as it relates to drafting those plans for security, traffic plans, porta potties, all the little things that you all appreciate that you don't think about, that it's his job to make sure that we have all of those things for those events, and that's his area of expertise. So 36 years of experience that's walking out the door. Obviously, that's an impact to us. But I can see, the tan that he's got now. He's grown a beard since he's left. George looks happy. His wife looks happy. I'm happy for George. And we just greatly appreciate his service to our community and our police department. Come on up, George.
Sergeant Bethel, thank you for your 36 years of service to this city. We're going to miss you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for this award, and I'm going to miss this place. Definitely miss the people I worked with for all those years, and seen a lot of good people come and go. But I brought my wife with me, Julie. I'd like to introduce her.
Stand up.
Stand up, Julie. Come on. She doesn't listen to me, believe me. And now it's worse. I'm at home 24 hours a day, so it's a little tough on her. So I think she's ready for me to go back to work. But thank y'all very much. I enjoyed it, and I do miss the city of Little Rock and the employees. I miss them the most. But thank y'all very much.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, sir.
Best of luck to you.
I'm sorry. Thank you, sir.
Stool. Okay, we can now move forward with the agenda. The first item you'll see is a proposed modification to the agenda to add a resolution dealing with a moratorium on conditional use permits in the extraterritorial jurisdiction. And you've got a copy of that resolution on your desk as well. Mr. Moore, you're wanting to add this, is that correct?
I do, Mayor. I've been working with Director Hines on this, and as the board knows, you passed two resolutions dealing with wastewater. One, a study that they're to do, and also a study that the city is to do. And so this would set in place a moratorium on those issues until those studies are complete. And the date, this will go through the end of next year. I also have a ordinance regarding limiting large group feedings in our parks and parks facilities that I would also like to add as a modification.
Okay, Director Adcock, you have a question, please?
Two things, Mr. Moore. On this first, on the moratorium, you said the end of next year. I think that wastewater has said that it would take them 2 years to do this study, so.
You know, I've talked to Mr. Ramon, and what he's going to do is he won't start it till next year, but he knows that it's all our goals to complete the work before the next session in 2019. So he knows our time frame and feels comfortable with it.
He feels like that they and us can have the funding that's necessary to do this study?
Well, as you know, I'm going to come back to you all once we put out the RFQ because we're going to have to do a budget adjustment. But I think his plan is to put it in his budget in 2018.
Okay. And on the other one, can you explain this large group feeding? How many is a large group feeding, and how many people now are feeding in the park that this is going to impact?
Okay, I'll let Mr. Carpenter kind of talk about the outline of the.
Director Hancock, the definition of a large group feeding is 25 people without charge.
25?
I don't know how many people are feeding where in the city of Little Rock now. All this does is say that they can use any park within the city, but a group can only use one park twice, once every 6 months within the city. That's how this is set up. It's modeled after an ordinance out of Orlando, Florida, which has been upheld on appeal. That's basically it.
Okay. And why are we looking at this at this time? Is this a problem?
I think one of the concerns is that we did have some issues with feedings within the Julius Breckling Park. That ended when they started building the bridge, but they're about to finish with that. So that's one issue in place. We've had complaints from businesses, particularly in the River Market area. And so what we wanted to do is get into place a proposal that says, look, you can feed, you can use our parks to feed, but you just can't feed every day or every week in the same park. And so they're going to have all 60 right now parks of the city available to them to do the feeding.
Okay, is this more than 25 people or up to 25 people?
More than 25 people or more.
25 people more. am supposed to go to the Homeless Coalition meeting tomorrow, and I wanted to know before I attend that meeting, have they looked at this?
I have not sent it to them, so probably not.
So none of the groups have looked at this yet?
I don't think so, no ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, you might want to give a little bit of a basis on the litigation that ensued in terms of the ability to proselytize from our parks as part of the genesis of this.
Well, this is an issue that's arising from around the country, and the situation in Orlando is that one church just basically took over a park. It really didn't have a building, so it made one of the downtown parks its church. And then there was another group that was using the park on a regular basis to deal with feeding ministry, whatever, for their groups. And so what the city of Orlando did is said, look, we don't mind you using our parks. We don't mind you using our parks for this purpose, but there are other purposes and programs in parks. So to keep that from happening, to keep there from being certain damage to certain areas, from this point on, we're going to say you can be in the same park twice in the course of a year. You can be in all of our parks. So they could be in the Breckling Park. 1 week they could be in in Murray Park the next week, so forth like that. That's how this is set up.
Okay. Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if it's appropriate, who initiated this?
Well, I've been asked for this for about a year or two, or three.
Was a board
There
member?
was some concern in the River Market that first initiated it. The mayor had an interest in this, and the Parks Department had an interest in management, and so that's when I started doing the research to see if we could do anything. And for the longest time, I didn't think we could, and then the Orlando decision came down, not only from the district court, also from the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and the U.S. Supreme Court decided not to look at it, so that's where it came from.
It's good, but I would suggest to Mr. Moore, what method will we use to get this information to the public? We're sitting here, we know about it. Is that going to be at the resource centers?
Our staff, Mr. Jones attends those coalition meetings, and Mr. Porter. So I'll be sure that they take copies of the document.
When will this go into effect? Next week?
No, if it's approved, it would go in, I'm sorry.
Yes, it doesn't have an emergency clause on it, so it'd be 30 days because there's some permits that we need to get developed and an application process and things like that.
And I'll help you. I'm going to distribute it all the churches in my ward, for sure. Thank you.
So is that all right to add as a modification?
If there's no objection, we'll go ahead and add both of these items to the agenda. Okay, if you'll look at the remaining items in the consent agenda, items 1 through 4, and let me ask if there's any questions on any of those items, please. Director Adcock.
I'd like to have a presentation on item 3, please.
Item 3, Ken's Cabs.
Yes.
Mayor, members of the board, this is a request by Ken's Cabs to purchase 7 taxi cab permits for the period January 1st, 17 through the December 31st of 2017. So that it's very similar to what we have done with our other applicants.
Mr. Moore, this is from January 17th. This happens to be May the 9th or 10th. So why are we going back to January the 1st? I know that this company has been doing this ever since January the 1st without a permit. So are we doing that because they have been doing this?
Director Adcock, if I may, the decision as to the aspect of the city's ordinance that requires a showing of necessity and convenience before increasing the number of taxi cab permits was set aside at the end of last year. The time for appeal ran this year. Because these are year-long permits from January to December, rather than mess it up, I just made it the calendar year.
Also,
So they will
when
come back in at the end of this year for 2018, as will Greater Little Rock Transportation.
this gentleman was before us, I don't think he was planning a 24-hour and meeting all the requirements. Is he going to meet all the requirements that we set up for taxi service now?
My understanding from Fleet is that he is, and that is still a legitimate requirement of the ordinance.
So, do you know where his 24-hour location is going to be?
Personally, I do not.
I would like to know, before we vote on this, please, where his 24-hour location is going to be, and the hours of that location's opening, and somebody on site to answer the phones.
Yes, ma'am.
And I would like to request that he's here next week so that we can ask him questions, please. Thank you.
Director Adcock, I presume that you would like to have this one held separately?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I also would like to have this Parks one held separate too, Mayor, because I think
Would
that-
you pull your microphone closer? We can't hear you.
Yes, I would also like to have this one that we added for Mr. Moore on feeding in the park separate, because I think that we may have people down here that wants to speak to this. I don't want it to look like we just pushed it right through very quickly.
Very well.
Thank you.
Okay, items 5 and 6 on planning and development. Any questions on those?
about that? Mine's on,
Director Wright,
mine's on public hearing.
on which item?
Mine is on 9.
Okay, well, we'll get there in just a second.
Yeah, 9, actually.
Okay, you can look at ordinances 7, 8, and 9. Are there any questions on 7 or 8? Director Adcock, go ahead, please.
I'd like to have a presentation, Mr. Moore, of what this is exactly.
Mr. Foshi, our IT director, to come forward.
This is our annual excuse me, Mayor, members of the board. This is our annual maintenance for our financial and HR systems, as well as the 4 modules y'all just voted for us to install within 4 on the last board meeting. This represents a 5-year total. If you look in the board communications, it actually shows the breakdown of the yearly payments for those 5 years. So this covers any patches or updates to that system, and any questions that staff have and concerns of how to configure it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Director Wright, you have a question on item 9?
I'd like a presentation on 8, and then I have a question for Mr. Carpenter on 9.
Mr. Brzezinski. I have only 2 more months to say that, huh?
Yeah.
Director Wright, Mayor, members of the board, item 8 is a request to abandon a 20-foot wide access and utility easement located on one lot in the Sandpiper addition, which is on Peachtree. That is the lot. It's adjacent to Interstate 430. And Scott, if we can go to the sketch map, or no, try the zoning map. I'm sorry, I guess we didn't include it, but there's, coming off, if we can go back to one of those maps, coming off of the southwest corner of the property, there's a 20-foot access utility easement that there's no need for it. Therefore, the applicant has requested abandonment of it to allow the future. This lot's currently undeveloped, and they're requesting the abandonment so they can build a single-family residence on it. It's zoned R2. And also, there's a little piece of highway department right-of-way, or I guess it's right-of-way or encroachment onto this property also, that the applicant's working with the highway department to acquire that. That would do
So this
away
is-
with that piece and then the utility easement so they could build the house.
So this is not in any way controversial? There shouldn't be any complaints from the neighbors and all that?
No, it's pretty cut and dry.
Just a routine?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, number 9, that's all I got on that. I just want to make sure my phone's not gonna blow up after tonight when they see it on TV. The next one is probably for Mr. Carpenter, because I've been getting a lot of letters, actual letters in the mail, and I've talked to several people on the phone, Lance, and one lady just, her concern was so compelling, I just said, let me ask the city attorney, because what she told me was that she is a very meticulous person. And before she bought her home, she said she did all her research. She looked at all the zoning in the area. She looked at what was existing, what was planned. She talked to her realtor. She talked to the developer out there. And she said there was no indication of this development not being a quiet office for this site. And she said, her question to me, what are potential property owners to do, or housing buyers to do, if they cannot rely on the research that they do before they make an investment in their home? If you can't rely on that, then every purchase that you make could be impacted or diminished based upon the fact that these changes come after the fact. I don't know if I'm explaining it the way she did, but what she said to me made a whole lot of sense. Okay, if I do my due diligence, and I still end up with a 3-story complex in my backyard with windows overlooking my house. So, is there any protection for these, for a buyer?
Well, Director Wright,
Now, you being watched, so she's watching.
I understand.
Okay.
The general answer to your question is that the city puts into place a plan as to how it wishes for development to occur. But it is a plan. And if
understand
things
that.
change, then the plan or the actual zoning in an area may change. This is a PUD, which means it's a highly regulated and controlled use of property for a particular purpose. It's along a road which is already expanded from being woods 10 years ago to 2 lanes until a couple of years ago, and they're expanding it out to 4 lanes with circles and a fire station since then. There's been changes, and the changes that come about lead to people seeking for those changes. So can I buy a piece of property and know that nobody around me will ever do anything? No, not unless you buy all the property. But what is going on here is a question of whether this is an appropriate use under these controlled circumstances at this location. And that's going to be the policy question for the board.
Well, I told her I would put that to our legal advisor, and once this issue is reviewed amongst us, everybody look at it based upon what's before us. It all sounds reasonable, but what she said to me sounded reasonable too. Thank you.
Director Hines, you're next, please.
Thanks. Bruce, and kind of getting to that question, because I had the same conversation. And as to a question as to why staff would not disclose that, I don't know if this is a plan, the previous zoning on it was a plan, either a PDO or POD that expired, I think, in 2013. They bought their house, I think, in 2015. And why would staff not disclose that the PDO or the POD was expired? And even on the city maps, it doesn't show that those have expired, even though we have an ordinance that says if they're expired. Maybe that's for Mr. Bazinski. Because that's the crux of this, is that we have, and talking to some of the folks in the neighborhood, is that this quiet office park has expired, and the chances that it's going to go back to that are it's going to go back to the original zoning per our ordinance, which is O2 zoning, which is not quiet office. It's fairly intense office use. So,
Director Hines, I really can't tell you why the staff person, or I'm not sure who.
but she's
is-
got a letter from us too. I mean,
that says
that says it's planned for quiet office.
a POD that,
Came in a packet this week, and I can scan it and send it to you tomorrow. Yeah.
but didn't note that it had expired.
There was
Because
nothing in what
the write-up, it does say a planned development expired.
Right, but whenever they bought their house 3 years ago, when she called, even though it was expired at the time, she's got a letter from staff, and I'll have to send it to you, but I don't recall seeing anything there that had expired. It was just that this is planned for as quiet office park.
That's what this 2010 planned development
Right,
was for.
which would have expired in when, 2013,
Yes, they're-
3 years?
They're
And I
good for
think-
3 years unless they request an extension.
And I think her letter was dated 2014. So that's from staff, but I'll forward it to you. That was a question I really couldn't answer, why we wouldn't have caught something like that, other than that. And I think Doris, kind of what Tom was saying is that, maybe I'm just the odd duck on this, but until a piece of property is developed, anything can happen, no matter what the zoning is. It's all subject to change. But, I mean, I know we try to plan around that, and we do our best to try to stay within those things. And this development that's going on this piece of property under the O2 zoning would be an allowed use with a conditional use permit, but the PDR or PZD is a much more restrictive zoning application, so. And the question I had for all the folks I've talked to is that, do you understand what can go in an O2 zoning because, by right, without any site, other than site plan review? And I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that as well, because that's this is gonna revert back to on this piece of property per our ordinance, with several of them. So, no. Yeah, and I've had the same conversation that I was waiting for staff, so, and I'll forward a copy of the packet we got, Tony. I
Okay,
was
thank
just
you.
curious why we didn't inform somebody of that.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. Tony, I want to compliment you again. I think I did this some time ago, is that you or staff, you do your job, and I think you do it well. But one time I did vote against you, that's all I want to tell you. I want to say about this ordinance, we are just here for a period, and if the law is there, that's what we must abide by. People call me, and I just let them know, don't call me with your problem, move, okay? That's what I tell them, move. I mean, we can't change the system for people if the law tells you to do certain things. So that's what I want to say. And time brings about a change. I can remember many, many years ago, I wouldn't be sitting here. So time brings about a change. And as board members, I would suggest that we don't cater to these people, we cater to administration.
Tony, if you come back to the podium, please. Would you, I noticed that the staff recommended approval of the plan zoning development. Would you go over your recommendation with us, please?
Sure. And again, this is on appeal to the board because the Plan Commission, by a vote of four ayes and 5 noes, denied the proposed plan development. Staff is in support of it. What the proposal, it's a development for age-restricted housing, a single building, 130 units on approximately 8 acres. The site plan, Mr. Carter, if we can go to the sketch. That's a site plan, and you can see adjacent to the residential neighborhood, Witchery Court, there's an existing 100-foot OS zoned open space area, and then part of this site plan, there's an additional 50-foot undisturbed area, and then the building's removed off that property line. This location is at an arterial collector intersection, Rawling Road being the arterial and Champano being the collector. And again, as Director Hines has mentioned, this property would, by going through a process, because the plan development's created by an ordinance, it has to go away by an ordinance. So it does, even though it's expired, it's not revoked automatically. That action would have to be taken by this board and then would revert back to O2, which is an office district, and there are similar uses allowed by right, a nursing home, convalescent homes allowed by right in O2. O2 is a site plan review district, which is primarily a technical review. And then there's some conditional uses such as multifamily hotel. Again, we looked at the site plan, the location, across the street, what's referred to on this map as tract 14. If we can go to the zoning map, Mr. Carter. Directly across Champano, there's C1 neighborhood commercial zoning, C2, which is what we refer to as our shopping center zoning. Then across Rawling Road, there's several planned developments. To the north is a large open space area, and then that area I mentioned adjacent to Witchery Court, and this property is zoned OS. We felt it was a good site plan. Again, the location being the intersection of Arterial and Collector, and the use we thought was reasonable with the existing zoning pattern and land use pattern in this area. And we did recommend approval to the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Director Fortson, you're next, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Tony, first, you just referred to it. There is a 50-foot green space buffer immediately adjacent to this property between this and the development. So are you saying that from the far end of this property to the homes on Wintry Court is how far? 50 feet plus what?
100 feet.
100 feet.
And that 50-foot, Director Fortson, is part of this site plan.
Right.
The 100-foot is a separate ownership, and it's zoned OS open space.
Refresh my memory. By right, what can go into this area under an O2 zoning?
By right, in O2, a bank, church, medical clinic, college fraternity. So, I mean, a daycare, both for children and adults, and then hospital, as I mentioned earlier, a funeral home, nursing home and convalescent home, of course, general or professional office, public school, private school. Then there are also conditional uses, which have, as you know, have to go through a process and be approved by the Planning Commission. And those include, you can have an eating place, health studio or spa, and what is referred to as high-rise multifamily at a density of not greater than 30 units per acre, hotel or motel, and that and then also a trade school.
That gives me an overview. I like Dr. Wright, Director Wright, have had a lot of communications on this, and on 2 or 3 occasions I have been referred to, and it really goes back to the pre-existing development that Director Hines referred to an agreement that had been executed between the developer of the property and the people in that neighborhood. I don't know whether it's something you want to comment on, or Mr. Carpenter, or whether either of you have looked into that.
Director Fortson, I've looked at the documents. There's nothing that I see that continued or is required to be carried out under any agreement. But because I've gotten 2 or 3 questions on this, what I'd really like to do is send this to you all in a memorandum on Friday that kind of goes through that.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have now.
Director Campuris, you're recognized, please.
I think they answered most of my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Director Hines?
Tony, one other question. So, I think it was either 6 or 9 months ago, we approved development further east on Chenal, at basically Chenal and Wellington Hills, the Chenal Lofts Apartments, which was an O2 with I think we did a CUP for a high-rise multifamily. So is this property similar in zoning and fit? I think this is a little less dense than what we approved on Chenal Lofts, and with more, I think more buffer than what we did at Chenal Lofts. Do you recall that?
Director Hines, I do recall the project, and it did fall under that conditional use of high-rise multifamily, which I think has to be at least 3 stories, and then the less than 30 units per acre. And it was handled as a conditional use.
Okay.
So if this, again, it would, going through the process, it would go back to O2, which would have that possibility as a conditional use, that type of development.
Okay, all right, that's what I'm trying to clarify. And then if it goes back to, how big of an office building could you build there? I mean, what are the limits on O2 zoning for height and that type of stuff for an office building?
In O2, there's a base height of 45 feet. But it does have allowance for every foot of setback increase. You can go up in height to a maximum of 120 feet. So I can't tell you how big of a building.
But those are the parameters?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Director Adcock, you're recognized, please.
Tony, in looking at the advertising piece on this, they're going to have a bank, they're going to have a beauty shop, they're going to have a barber shop, they're going to have a pharmacy, they're going to have a 150-feet theater. You know, whenever I think of senior high-rises, I think of Good Shepherd, Parkview Towers, and those. This certainly is not one of those. I mean, we've got all these retail businesses in this. So are those businesses open to the public?
Director, I don't think so. I think those are for the tenants of this particular
If we're
project.
going to have 130 units, how is that going to support a pharmacy and a beauty shop, barber shop, and those kind of uses?
That's a question for the applicant.
Okay. Is the applicant here? The applicant's attorney.
That-
He'll be here to speak to it on Tuesday.
Okay, next Tuesday. Well, I would like to have an answer to that because I can't understand how they could make enough money off of 120 residents or 130 residents to support that type of retail businesses in this location. Thank you.
A point of clarification, Tom. On our paper handout, it indicates a resolution. I believe on the screen it said an ordinance. This is an ordinance, is it not?
Yes, this is an ordinance.
Okay. Just if you will note that, it'll be an ordinance, not a resolution. Okay. We're going to have a financial report, and we're also going to have a healthcare report. I also want to put the completion of Tom Carpenter's review on this agenda. I got everybody here. I mean, we've been trying to get that done with a variety of people out, so I want to try and get that complete on Tuesday. The final piece of that, yes.
Let me ask Ms. Lenahan to come forward.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. I'm going to present our year-end 2016 financial results. Our auditors are here as we speak, going through the review of the financials, but we do not anticipate any changes at this time. So first, we'll go to our revenue page. As of the end of the year, we had collected 0.24% more than 100% of our final amended budget. And that compares to 99.98% the same period a year ago. So very, very close to our amended budget. On the next slide, you'll see in dollars, we collected $190,254,768 compared to an amended budget of $189,801,922 and compared to $188,882,406 the same period last year. So we were $453,000 above the amended budget. Again, that's on a $190 million budget for the most part, and our revenues were $1.37 million more than the same period last year. On the next slide, you'll see the variances by category. In our property tax revenue, and again, this is compared to the amended budget, we had a favorable variance of $473,000. I do want to point out that $354,000 of that amount was dedicated to our police and fire pension funds, the closed pension funds. The other $118,000 was available to general government. I'll go into detail on our sales tax in a moment, but we were just under $155,000 below our amended budget. The other revenues came in very close. I'll tell you our charges for services. The unfavorable variance there is due to primarily two items. One is we had to reduce the 911 fee reimbursement that comes from the collection of 911 fees and helps to offset the salaries that are in the general fund for 911 operators, because the maintenance of the communication system for 911 continues to rise. So those fees go to that first in the 911 fund, and then remaining funds are transferred as available to the general fund. The other negative variance was in the reimbursement for airport police compared to what we had budgeted. And there's a cap on the amount of overtime that they reimburse, and so that came in a little bit less than budget, and those two items combined make up that variance. Our fines and fees were actually a little bit more than budget, $235,000. That was primarily due to some accruals that we made in December for collection of traffic tickets that were issued prior to year end, that were collected in the first 2 months of 2017. So they were 2016 revenues that were collected subsequent, and that also included collection of years prior to that. We have a company engaged to help us with delinquent collections, and so that includes both of those items. The negative on the investment income, our actual investment income, our interest earnings, and our realized investment gains were actually up and were right in line with budget. The negative is what we call a fair market value adjustment that's done at the end of each year. It's due to rising interest rates, which have a negative impact on your fixed income investments. But this is a measurement as of a point in time. We actually hold those investments till maturity, so we never experience these unrealized losses. But as of this measurement date, we have to record that fair market value adjustment. And then our miscellaneous revenues, there were some reimbursements for workers' comp, premium payouts, and some rebates that were higher than what we had anticipated. So again, all in, it was just a 0.24% variance from our amended budget, extremely close. On the next slide, this is the comparison to the original adopted budget before we made our budget amendment in the middle of the year. And we've many times talked about what those adjustments were. They're highlighted for you at the bottom of the slide. The big things to point out where we really missed the boat in our original budget was our sales tax revenues. We had forecast would be a 2.2% growth. They, of course, were not. We made it a downward adjustment of $1.7 million. The actual results were actually $1.8 million below our original adopted budget. And then the other area where we had a lot of difficulty was the utility franchise fees. And that was primarily the Entergy and the CenterPoint fees. And due to the very low natural gas prices and the very mild winter, we had to adjust those items down as well. The largest positive variance was our intergovernmental revenues. And again, that is based or tied to pension turnbacks that come from the state. And they were phasing in an adjustment. So I believe our year-to-date revenues in 2016 will be, our future revenues will be comparable to that moving forward. The next slide is the comparison to the same period a year ago. And the positive variance in our general property tax revenue, we had talked about earlier in the year how the excess commissions on the 2015 property tax receipts had to be recorded as 2016 revenue due to the late receipt from the county. And that made up about $694,000 of the favorable variance. And then approximately $600,000 of that variance is also dedicated to our police and fire pension funds. We've really already discussed all the other variances. The utility franchise fees declined substantially from the previous year, again, primarily due to mild weather and reduced natural gas prices. The next slide, we'll talk about our sales tax revenues. This is the 2-year look back by month of our property or of our sales tax collections. And again, there's still quite a bit of volatility. Our collections in February, which reflect sales in the month of December, were down a blended 4.13%. The city sales tax portion was down 4.24%. The county sales was down 4.26%. The piece that brought it up to just 4.13% negative was state turnback revenues. Year-to-date, our blended sales tax results were 0.16 below the amended budget and 0.14% below last year. So the next slide just shows you just those blended results that I've gone over. So again, down 4.13 for the month, and compared to the same period a year ago, down 0.14%. The next slide shows that in dollars. And again, we adopted our budget amendment in November, so everything prior to that we trued up. And you'll see that we had wide swings every month following that. And our February receipts for December sales were $479,566 below budget, which brought our overall annual amended budget, actual revenues came in $154,884 below that amended budget. And it was about $135,000 below the same period a year ago. The next slide shows our revenue provided by the new 1 cent sales tax. That highlighted number again is just the comparative figure from last year where we reimbursed the airport cumulative collections prior to that on associated with aviation fuel tax, which very minimally skews the results. But overall, the growth year over year on our new 1 cent tax, 0.12%. Over the life of the tax, we've collected just over $239 million. 89.7 million of that has gone towards the capital projects that we committed to voters. 149.3 million has gone to operating expenses such as the parks maintenance, the additional code enforcement officers. We've added several police positions, although we do have several vacancies, we still have added quite a few positions. And I want to remind you too of the grant-funded positions that we had prior to the time the tax passed. 27 cops positions, I believe it was 18 fire positions that we've taken on full cost as well, along with the operating expenses for the 12th Street Station, the new West Little Rock Fire Station, the West Central Community Center, all of the completed capital projects. On the next slide, we show our electric franchise fee revenues. And so our original budget was $14,632,000, which represented a 2.7% increase over the previous year. In our amendment, we dropped that down to $13,458,000, which was a decline of 5.6%. We ended up just slightly better than that, $46,600 better than the amended budget. Revenues were just below 5% less than the same period a year ago. On the next slide, you'll see our gas franchise fees. Again, we came in ahead of our amended budget, but we were 22% less than the same period a year ago, which was a decline of about $719,500. We actually beat our amended budget due to very strong receipts for the month of December, when we were up $150,000 over our amended budget year to date. But we actually had growth in the month of December. Every other line up there is a negative, but we had growth in usage of 3.86% in the month of December and revenues 20.82%. That concludes the revenue portion, and now we'll move on to our expenses. On the next slide, you'll see that on the expenditure side, we spent 99.84% of our amended budget. So again, very close to our amended budget, just 0.16% off, or less than that. And that compared to 98.34% of the budget a year ago. In dollars, on the next slide, you'll see we expended $187,343,145. And again, these are operating expenses. As with the revenues I just went over, both of these exclude transfers in and out. So the adopted amended revenue budget was $187,649,000. So our expenditures were just $306,600 below the amended budget. They were $7.2 million more than the same period a year ago. And a lot of that relates to debt service on the notes that we took out to accelerate our 3/8 capital projects. We had transfers in that helped to accommodate that expense. So when you look at it by department on the next slide, Scott, you'll see favorable variances are positive, unfavorable variances are negative. The favorable variance in general administration is primarily due to a reduction in workers' comp premiums and in the actuarially determined non-uniform pension contribution, and that's partially offset by increases in our property insurance. The criminal court favorable variance was primarily due to they had full staffing through the entire year. They did not utilize any of their part-time funding. And then there were also some other operating cost savings there. As you move down the line, the information technology variance is primarily just due to vacant positions. Then get down to golf, and we have our negative 112,000. Of that amount, 45,000 was associated with personnel, part-time and overtime cost. 67,000 was the remaining variance, and that was divided between supplies, primarily for the concessions and the pro shop, 20,600. And then there was 18,600 in excess repairs and maintenance, and other contract and credit card fees of about 28,000. On the fire department, the negative variance there, actually the majority of that is the dedicated pension revenues were more than what we had forecast. We saw that on the property tax variance when I showed you the revenues. We still contribute 100% of that to the closed pension funds. So their pension contributions were more than budgeted by $316,000, but that was completely offset by that excess revenue. They also had about $202,000 of additional personnel costs, but that was offset by savings in fuel and other repairs and maintenance. So the primary variance here is just the pension contribution. On the police department, that same pension story, but that accounts for $237,000 of their variance. They too had some excess personnel cost with overtime and all, but they offset some of that with savings on fuel again. And actually they had some rent expenses that were more than budgeted, but that was also offset by repairs and maintenance savings. So all in, again, just a net variance of $306,000, and that is a favorable variance. Finally, we'll look at our vacant positions. We started the year with a budget of $6 million for vacancy savings. We increased that during our budget amendment to help offset the decline in revenues. We raised it to $7,250,000. We achieved that goal before the end of November. We did have 143 budgeted positions that were unfilled in the general fund at year end, and that did include 62 police officer positions and 4 sergeant positions. Our vacation and sick payouts, we budgeted at $1,350,000. We actually spent $1,390,000 for employees that were leaving service with the city that were paid out their vacation and sick accruals. And then the next slide just shows the trend on the positions. At the end of December, we had 143 vacant positions in the general fund. And if you look back at the beginning of the year, we started with 137 vacant positions at the beginning of the year. We did have a fire recruit school that started in November that temporarily lowered the number of vacant positions. And so that concludes the financial report. You'll be receiving your written variance memo and the detailed 40-page financial packet with all the funds sometime probably by the end of the week on Friday.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. There's some questions. Director Hendricks, you're first, please.
Thank you. I want to ask Mr. Moore on those unfilled positions. Would you copy that and send me a copy? Positions, what department?
We can.
Thank you. You said you can?
It's It's a report we'll run by department. I'll look at it regularly, but I'll get it to you.
Director Campuris?
I was just gonna ask you the date that our representatives are gonna come talk to us about the tax, the internet tax, and when they're gonna talk to us about that.
Well, I have talked to Congressman Hill, and he indicated that he had he had talked to some of you, including,
He has, but we've had.
but he said it was very difficult for him to be able to make a Tuesday meeting.
Well,
I've talked with, I think actually the city manager's office was going to try and set up those meetings. Congressman Cotton has not responded to our letter, and Senator Bozeman has publicly expressed his support, and his aide here has indicated that, again, Tuesday's a difficult time for him to meet, but that he is very supportive of the internet tax legislation that's pending in the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Well, but we don't have to meet on Tuesday. I mean, if they say they're gonna come on Thursday afternoon, we can all come Thursday afternoon. I mean, they usually fly home Thursday, Friday, Sunday before they go home, Saturday afternoon late. I mean, there's.
All right, Mr. Moore, if you'll see what we can do to contact the two senators and Congressman Hill, I guess we can set up a special meeting if they will be willing to meet with us in session. Director Wright, you're recognized, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Moore, how many police officers do you think you'll get hired by the end of the year?
We have a class of 18 right now, and I don't know what it is, but we usually lose 2 or 3. I think I do know what it is, but all 18 are still in the class, and the chief tells me he feels real good about that. So we'll have those 18. We're going to hire about 5, run a class of 5 certified officers from other areas. That's going to start, I think, next month. Then we'll have another recruit school starting in July and another one in November. We're going to, even before we're able to make the changes in our overall process, we're going to do something a little different on our structured interview going forward. That still continues to be an issue for us. The new, I think the chief mentioned, overall the new testing procedures won't go into effect until the class, and that will start in February. And the reason that is a lot of them, especially the July, November class, have already started the process. They've already taken the written test, they've taken the physical. So the city attorney's office opined that I really couldn't change the process once it started. So, we're running multiple classes, and if we can get a good 20 to 25 out of each class. But Sergeant Bethel's a good example. 36 years. We've got a lot of them that are reaching their 28 years which is when they can retire. So I'm working with the union to see what type of incentives we can give the officers that have been here a while to maybe stay. But the one thing I want the board to realize is, one, we're no longer doing these long-term contracts. If y'all remember, those of you all were here in 08 and 09, I had contracts with all the unions for 3 and 2.5%. And thankfully, we were able to do some other incentives that they allowed us. I mean, they realized we didn't have any money, but I did do some other things for them. And but the challenge that we have, and you just saw our revenue forecast, where we ended the year, we're still probably very close to where we are at the end of the year. And so you have an officer that had reached his 28th year, and they can retire and know that automatically they're going to get a 3% raise each year because they're part of LOPFI. And so when we're giving 1.5 and 2%, and they can get over here and get 3% automatically, that's really a challenge for us. So we're going to see what other types of things that we can do to try to incentivize our old officers, seasoned officers, to stay with us for a while longer.
So it's really a toss-up. So, because when people ask me at my neighborhood meetings,
We're on average, and this is where I'd like to get back to, where we're going to lose about 20 to 25 people. So once we catch up, we won't be able to, we won't have to have multiple classes, but we're going to continue multiple classes until we get enough people in these positions that are unfilled.
well, I submitted a proposal to you to hire additional 30 teenagers. Is there any way we can do that?
Well, I'm still looking at it, Director Wright. But to be honest, we set aside over $1 million to hire people during the summer. We're trying to target some of the youth that we know that potentially have been involved in some of the things that are going on.
Right.
I set aside a certain number of slots for them. Hiring additional 30, considering where we are with our revenue right now, I think would be tough. But I also want you all to remember that Parks hires people a lot of people during the summer to work at community centers and pools, and so when you see that number of 650, it's really closer to about 700, or maybe even over 700 that we're actually hiring during the summer.
So is it possible that we may be able to get some of these kids in the parks? Because I was going through Boyle Park and all that debris washed down through Rock Creek, and you can't walk the trails. It's all just stuff just embedded in the...
We hire a crew during the Parks hires a young crew, mainly college, high school students during the summer to do that.
Have they
and
done
that's
it,
already
or they
funded.
will do it?
Yeah, they don't start till after school starts.
Okay, so I
But
can
the
let
Parks crew is, they need to call Parks and let them know they're interested. I'm not sure if Truman has an application process.
Okay, thank you.
It's called the Environmental Youth Team.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Director Fortson, you're recognized, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Moore answered one of my questions about police officer retention. Sarah, I did have a question for you. I may have misunderstood you. Did you say that you're taking unrealized security gains or losses are coming into our annual income statement?
Yes, we have to make a fair market value adjustment at the end of each year on investments, and so there's a temporary negative or positive. Last year we had a positive adjustment because we had falling interest rates. This year we have rising interest rates. We have a negative adjustment. It reverses at the first of the next year, and we actually, again, if we weren't managing our portfolio well and we're not holding our investments to maturity, there would be the potential to have to recognize those unrealized gains or losses. But for the most part, we hold all of our investments to
How often do
maturity.
you value those securities? Once a year or once a month?
We get statements monthly, and we mark our unrealized gains and losses, but the year-end adjustment, that's primarily on like the funds that are with the trustee, where we'll get those investments, or our pension funds. On the investments for just our combined bank portfolio, we only make that adjustment at the end of the year.
I won't prolong the discussion here, but I know, and it may be a difference in governmental accounting and private, but in the private sector, all that goes against the equity rather than the income account, would not affect the income. But I have one other question. Would you go to slide 15, Mr. Carter? I want to commend you on your financial management, but I want to know what you cut out to save $3 in the finance budget.
We
All right.
actually had to work really hard because we had some increased software maintenance expenses, but we did make it. I did want to tell you all one other thing. You know, our 2015 audit last year did not conclude until October because we had the delay with the pension valuations from LOMPI and the new pension standards. We did have net income at the end of last year. We used some of that in balancing the 2017 budget. We used some of those carryover funds, but we had 582,000 that we did move into our restricted reserve. That balance had set at 9,418,000 for many years, and we now do have that at $10 million.
Good.
So I just wanted to let you know that we had done that.
Very good. Thank you, Sarah. Director Hines.
Thank you. Just with a little prodding from Director Adcock, we still have 2 hours and 15 minutes to go vote for the Little Rock School District millage extension. So just want to remind everybody that's home and everybody up here that lives in Little Rock School District, encourage you to go out and vote today.
Director Adcock.
Yes, Mr. Moore, in the paper this week, North Little Rock had lots of license or permits that had not been paid. How are our license and permits doing? And do we have a bunch past due, and are we doing something to try to collect them?
I'll check. We actually, I think, have a pretty good rate of people returning, but I'll get you an updated report on that.
What other items are we now having outside collection agencies collect for the city?
Unpaid parking tickets.
And how are they doing?
I'll just have to, we engage.
I'd like to have an update on the parking tickets. Are we still tying up the tires on automobiles?
We are.
Good. Thank you.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Mr. Moore, I wanted to ask, thank you, I want to ask Mr. Moore if you would be receptive. I have some ideas where you can make thousands of dollars, and I want to let you know.
I need a little more than the thousands.
I said thousands with an S on it.
Okay.
And I'll get with you.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything else for the good of the order?
Mayor, we have the healthcare update.
Oh, all right. That's
On
right.
the
We do.
next page.
They've been patiently waiting.
Mayor, members of the board, at the request of the board, we are going to be doing quarterly updates on our health care. I will tell you, and Mr. Tom Kane from Stevens, as he comes up, there are a lot of unknowns right now. And so we're watching them, and Tom's watching them. We're meeting on a regular basis, but we just wanted to kind of give you an update on what we have so far from our 2016 numbers, and then kind of talk about what we're planning on, what we're preparing for in the future. Tom?
Okay. Mayor and members of the board, first I'd like to just review 2016 and look back at what had happened. My name is Tom Kane, K-A-N-E. And so if we can go to the next slide. So as you know, we changed to United Healthcare January 1, 2016. And now that that's behind us, the city, including the employee contributions, paid in $13,228,000. And United Healthcare paid out a little over $14 million in claims. Now that does not include costs for administration, risk, or taxes that they have to pay. So just a claim to premium ratio, we ended the year at 106.3%. Difficult year to say the least. During 2016, we had 19 claimants who had claims that exceeded $100,000 in payments. One individual was over $1 million. So we had a lot of claims in 2016. The good news is, January, we're off to a much better start than we were a year ago. So for January 2017, we have a 65% claim to premium ratio compared to 102% in 2016. We should have numbers for February by the end of this week. And then next week, the United Healthcare team is coming in to do a much deeper dive into what happened in the last 12 months and how we look going forward. Any questions on? Yes, sir.
knowing this personally. There is a large amount of money that an insurance company holds. So when we look at 106% of payout versus in, how much money do they make, or do they tell you, on our money while they're holding it before they pay the claims? Because really, when you say that, it looks like that they're not making, that they're holding the money and making interest on it and investing it while they're holding it, and short-term maturities of some sort. So there is an internal amount of money they're generating. And can you tell us what that is?
I can get that information for you. I
I
don't
mean,
have it.
it's deceiving when it looks like it's because that money's not sitting in a bank at 0.5% waiting to have something done with it. I mean, they make a lot of money off holding money.
There is investment income. It's not as much as in say a life insurance premium, because they're paying claims out on a daily basis.
Right, but I mean, there is their interest is getting our money in quickly and paying claims out slowly. I mean, just
I'm not
as,
going to argue that.
I mean, and the delta on that is money that they make. So when they say we paid out more in claims than we took in, that's true, but that doesn't tell you what they've made on holding our money for that period of time.
We'll request a full accounting for 2016 and get that to the city manager. Okay. Any other questions on 2016? Okay. So next slide. So what our strategy, or what we're recommending for the city going into this cycle for 2018, is really three options. We're going to do a fully insured RFP. Currently fully insured. City's always been fully insured, so we want to look at that. But we're really more interested in looking at a traditional self-funded plan with reinsurance. And the third option is a self-funded plan with reinsurance, but with direct contracts to clinically integrated networks in the community. Now, that's a new concept for a lot of people. It's actually been around for a long time. They're also being referred to as narrow networks. But if we can go to the next slide, this is a lot of information. I'm sorry if this is so busy. But when you direct contract with a clinically integrated network, you're shifting from a fee-for-service reimbursement methodology to a fee-for-value. And today, these groups of physicians and hospital have the IT capability that they can literally track the practice of each participating provider. And so we negotiate with a group of physicians and a hospital, and we set a budget. And they try to manage the health of that population to a budget. And then we also look at quality indicators as well. So it's not, the purpose of the clinically integrated network is to provide higher quality care. And so we're identifying individuals within the population of the city of Little Rock who have chronic disease. We're aligning them with a primary care physician, and they are managing the chronic disease of those individuals to a lower cost with higher quality outcomes, and hopefully we won't have 19 individuals with claims exceeding $100,000. So this is really where healthcare is moving. Director Campiris can speak to this better than I can, but this is where healthcare is moving in this country, and it's where it has to move to. We have to be reimbursing providers based on quality outcomes, not based on the number of services provided. So we have had conversations with some groups in Little Rock. We are actually meeting with one tomorrow and another one on Friday. And this is a little different than a traditional RFP for a fully insured, or even for a traditional self-insured plan. So I don't know how much of this we're going to be able to do within a formal RFP process, because there's going to be a lot of negotiations. Our thoughts are to give the employees the choice, and also within both of those choices to have access to UAMS and Children's. There would be a national wrap, so if somebody was outside the state of Arkansas, they would have access to a national network, and of course there would be the pharmacy drug piece as well. And one more. So next steps, we're going to build our traditional RFPs for option 1 and 2. As I said earlier, we're meeting with the United Healthcare team next week, so we hope to have those RFPs out by the end of next week. And then all of them will be due the first week of August. And this should allow us time to finish our negotiations, begin communication, and open enrollment in November.
Tom, if that clinical approach, does it presume that you would contract with only one hospital other than what you mentioned about UAMS and Children's?
We are having discussions with both sides of town.
Well, I understand you're having discussions with both, but under that concept, you would choose one. You would not have access to both. Is that right or wrong?
The employees would make, in an ideal situation, the employees is going to select, I want to be in this network or I want to be in that network. And we think, at least going in year one, you can't have steerage in the form of better benefits for one or the other, or better pricing for one or the other. And then once you get into it, you can actually look at the data and see which network is outperforming the other one, assuming that one does. So you could start off theoretically with both clinically integrated networks, but in 3 to 5 years, the city might have to pick one over the other. I mean, that's a...
So you're presuming that if that were selected, there would be two networks, one that included Baptist and one that included St. Vincent's? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Director Cabeers?
Well, I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate, Bruce, you getting them here early so we can talk about this and it's not a November surprise that we're doing. So I think we're doing the right thing. Tom, I think you're on exactly the right course. I mean, I can promise you, United will come back and there'll be a probably double-digit increase because they will quote those statistics and say, and they won't look at internal earnings. They'll just quote, we're 106% over what premiums, we lost 6% of money. In order to make up for that, we're going to charge you 12, 14%. But we can go down that path and continue paying more each time. But we're going to have to do something to get it under control. And either we do it as a self-insured versus like y'all do at your office, or we're going to do something where we're moving to a different paradigm of the way you do things in this community, and that's what we need to do. You have to deliver better cost at a lower cost, and that sounds like it's crazy, but it's not, and it can work.
Yes, sir.
Tom, do you think, you mentioned you're going to look at a self-insured program for us. Do you think we're large enough
Oh,
to
absolutely.
do self-insurance?
Yes. Yeah, you are.
Without taking inordinate risks?
Well, you would purchase reinsurance at both the specific and aggregate levels. So you would have a large deductible per each insured, but you would also have an aggregate cap. And the aggregate cap is going to define what the city's liability is for that year. Now, obviously, we want to manage our cost well below that aggregate cap to save the city money. But really, you know, with the clinically integrated network, what we're talking about is improving the health of the population. And we didn't get where we are today in the last 6 months or a year. And so this is a 3 to 5 year strategy of engaging the employees and their dependents on their health, to be personally responsible for their own health, and engaging with high-quality primary care. We really think that that's the key to changing this whole dynamic. And it's not just City of Little Rock. It's the whole country is dealing with this.
Let me give you an example of what happens. When you go if you go to a clinically integrated network, and let's just say Lance had to have a cholecystectomy. I don't know what that is. You had to have your gallbladder taken out. Instead of saying we're going to pay the anesthesiologist, we're going to pay the gastroenterologist, we're going to pay the surgeon, we're going to pay, each one is an individual. Tom would negotiate a fee for a cholecystectomy. It then becomes the clinical integrated network's problem of deciding who gets what. And then what happens is that the network then has to say, in order to make money, we have to have people that have a low risk or have a low operative post-infectious rate who get out of the hospital in 1 day rather than 5 days, because the way the clinical integrated network makes money and the people in it that do it is that you have a shared risk. And it's not a shared risk on a big basis, it's on Lance's cholecystectomy. And if everybody does it right, then Lance gets better care because he gets better people operating on him. He gets out of the hospital faster because the hospital then is incentivized to make sure that there's no wound infection or anything like that. And everybody then works together and gets paid. And it is a better, if in theory, it works better. It makes people have to work together, and it makes people, before they can get into the network, have some track record that they're doing well. And I'm not trying to steal your thunder, but that's basically what we're talking about doing. So if you do that, and then you take people that have chronic illnesses, hypertension, diabetes, overweight, and you put them with a family doctor, and you say, you're going to incentivize that doctor to say, if you keep them out of the hospital, if they lose weight, then they're going to get more of a pool. Then everybody wins, and it brings it down to the individual on how you do things, and that's what I think you're trying to, to tell people, and that's how it works. So your gallbladder came out this week. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Doctor.
Okay.
Call you Doctor for that one.
All
You
right.
bet. Okay, Director Richardson, you have a comment or question?
Yes, Mayor, not for this issue. Thanks, Tom, for your wonderful presentation. Mayor, a while back, while discussing Director Hendricks' residency ordinance for police department officers, we had several different scenarios that we discussed in terms of looking at the public safety implications, the financial implications. I think during the agenda meeting, made a recommendation that we had, as an incentive, had take-home cars for all officers who live in the city of Little Rock. And I think Bruce came back with one figure during the agenda meeting. And the following week, I think we had a different figure that's a little bit higher. So, Mayor, in the course of that conversation after that, just looking at the financial implications again, I think that Bruce had made a recommendation or a suggestion that he would have a report mid-September. And in addition to that report, may I ask whether or not we're putting our officers in unfair tax advantages by having them have take-home cars leaving the city? And I think Sarah chimed in and said there was exceptions for public safety officers taking those cars home. Mayor, I think you even chimed in. Director Haynes, I think you chimed in. And one of my colleagues a couple of weeks ago expressed some disappointment by having a report be a month late. And this report was promised to us mid-September, and we still don't have Bruce, I still don't have an update on what our take-home car policy is, and I would like to see what timeline are we working on right now, because we've been waiting on this since September.
Here it is.
Thank you.
And I told you that yesterday in an email, or
I
even
want to
today.
I was expecting to see it up here, so I thank you for having that, and hopefully it'll give us the information we need. And lots of my people have been asking about this as well. I've been having conversations, questions about this since September. So thank you, Bruce. I think you chimed in on it too.
Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
It's Mr. Moore. Can we start looking at the abandoned homes in Ward 1? I'm not worried about nobody else's ward. And you know where I'm coming from, okay?
Yeah, and Bruce, while you're at it, would you, you can just give us that memo that I think you put out recently about the number that have been taken down and by ward? And I guess probably the expense that's to the city that those various houses have cost by ward. Okay, that concludes the items that we have for this agenda meeting. Thank you very much.